Good afternoon, all the attendees and panelists. The biggest challenge every food processing industry faces today is the lack of advancement and innovation in its manufacturing practices. To bridge this upgradation gap, we at Neologic decided to present emerging food tech webinar series where we will talk about cost-effective food automations and applications of top-notch machineries and technologies, then current trends and future directions in the food processing sector and much more. In this seventh webinar of this series, today we will be talking about India's emerging market, that is processed tomatoes and processing solutions. Few word about today's speaker, Mr. Sri Krishna Ozarkar. Born in middle-class family in Nashik, he completed his education in Pune by completing mechanical engineering from Pune University in 1987. After spending few years in SKF, he joined Alfa Laval and worked in a project planning and execution in dairy and beverage sector for manufacturing departments. He started his entrepreneurial journey by starting his own firm in 1996 and eventually merged his business areas with Neologic. He was instrumental in Neologic's partnership with Fenco Food Machinery Italy for fruits and vegetable processing machineries. Professionally a hardcore technocrat, charter engineer and valuer, his interests are reading books and Indian classical music. So ladies and gentlemen, let me present our speaker today, Mr. Sri Krishna Ozarkar. Over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Nikhil, for a wonderful introduction. And good afternoon, all the attendees and participants and hosts. So like the topic mentions today, the emerging market, that is tomatoes processing and why tomatoes. We are going to go into detail of all this. First of all, government has identified top, that is tomato, onion, and potatoes as the priority sector in which these tomatoes also fall. And as far as we are concerned, this becomes a priority sector in terms of processing. So first, let us understand what are the objectives of this particular webinar. What are we going to do, or what are we going to cover in this particular coming 45 minutes to 50 minutes of 1 hour. First, let us understand the global and Indian scenario in tomatoes processing. Secondly, we'll also try to understand what is the need of the processing, why tomatoes need to be processed, why we cannot have all the fresh all the time. Then third is what all we can do in terms of processing of tomatoes. And fourth, emerging areas. So what is the future, what we are going to do in tomatoes, or what could be the attractive part in terms of tomato processing, that we will be covering in this particular session. So first, let us understand global and Indian scenario. So tomato globally, China is leading in terms of production, in terms of also processing. India comes second globally, of course, even ahead of USA, Turkey, and other countries. But in terms of processing, we are lacking. But as you see from the table, as you also see from the slide, we are the second largest country in terms of volume of tomatoes produced, and more than 20 million tons in the fiscal year 2019 and 20. We are also the second largest globally in terms of population, which gives us idea or the emerging market, what we say, because all these people are going to consume the tomato products or to processed tomatoes. The Indian economy, as we can see, is predominantly dominated by agricultural sector, and which shows that almost 16 to 17% of our economy is contributed by the agricultural sector in terms of GDP. As I mentioned earlier, tomato is one of the topmost priority crops in terms of TOP, that is tomato, onion, and potatoes. These actually top foods or top staples found across the country symbolize our government's initiative to call Operation Greens. So there are certain subsidies, certain incentives given by the government for this Operation Green. And that is why we should also promote processing of these fruits, especially tomatoes. Need for processing. So let us understand why tomatoes need processing, especially in Indian conditions. Tomatoes are perishable in nature, so they cannot be preserved as a fresh for a longer duration. Of course, they can be stored for a certain period of time, but then we lose the moisture, we lose the nutrient content in the fruit. So all this considering the fact they need to be processed in order to reduce the losses just because of storage. In India, we actually have a large percentage of wastage during harvesting or post-harvesting as well. A huge post-harvest losses of harvested tomatoes occur due to inadequate storage facilities, which also bring substantial losses to the growers, that is farmers, and hence the national economy. As per government estimate, around 12.5% of tomato wastage goes post-harvesting, which is very huge in comparison with the rest of the countries. The preservation of tomatoes in semi-processing system not only takes care of the market surplus, but also ensures that raw materials for finished products like sauces, ketchups, juices, paste are actually getting sufficient amount of raw material. Again, as I mentioned, some earlier scenario, this I think most of our attendees or participants today must have experienced or seen in the past. So here you can see a lot of news articles coming up every year, almost every year since last few years, that tomatoes are thrown on the road because the rate was crashed or there was no rate because they cannot afford to take the tomatoes to the market because the rate is so low. So rather than that, those are thrown on the roads. These are some of the pictures of actual tomatoes thrown on the road, given to cattle or just lying as it is. So this is actually experienced by everyone almost every year. So let us now understand what all we can do in processing of tomatoes. So when I say tomato processing line, it can be into various aspects. It can be dices, so small dices, it can be 5 by 5, it can be 10 by 10, or even as big as 15 by 15 in tomato puree or tomato pulp. Then peeled tomatoes, the whole tomato is peeled and actually put in tomato puree, which is also available in as a canned product. And tomato paste, one of the most popular way of processing tomatoes because it is a thicker version of a juice. It is a concentrated juice and it can store a large amount of tomatoes, the normal ratio being 6:1. So 6 kgs of tomato is equal to 1 kg of tomato paste. Pizza sauce, pasta sauce, so different sauces, ketchups, drinkable juice, getting very popular nowadays. A lot of people actually ask for tomato juice and powder, tomato powder, which is also ingredient for not many items. We're going to see each of these aspects in the next slides. So first understand about the diced or peeled tomatoes. So diced tomatoes and peeled tomatoes, as you can see, are available in the cans all over the world. Recently in India, we have started getting good amount of market for this kind of product, although this was existing quite a long back in Europe, Middle East, and other countries. Diced tomatoes is again in demand for HoReCa segment, that is hotel, restaurants, and catering. High demand of Generation Z, so that is the latest generation, a surge of usage from hospitality industry, and increase in demand for nutrient-rich foods is actually driving this sector. So we'll see in some slides that how this is growing in coming last 10 years, how this is growing very fast. So here you can see the data from 2009, and this is showing the imports of canned tomatoes. So it can be peeled or it can be diced. So as you can see, almost China and Italy dominating this import. In fact, in last few years, it is in Italy. So there is a huge potential. You can see the figures on the y-axis, also 1200 tons. So this is actually available in India to be processed because we are not processing that much. So this market is available to be tapped. So opportunity for us to produce these products in India and to be self-sufficient or in fact export in coming time. Again, in tomato processing solutions, we can see tomato ketchup. Here are different brands available in the market. We all know that tomato ketchup is typically made from tomato paste, spices, salt, vinegar, sugar, onion and garlic paste, and other items, added to the extent that ketchup contains at least 12% of tomato solids and 28% of total solids. This is a typical flowchart for preparation of tomato ketchup. You can see sugar syrups section, that is a separate section irrespective of whether you want tomato ketchup or not. Sugar syrup needs to be prepared for various beverage items as well. You have tomato paste pumping from pumping station, dilution, and then going into the kettle for mixing and heating with the sugar syrup. And then you have small tanks for preparation of starch, salt, vinegar, demineralized water, microelements, and all these are going to go into the kettle to prepare the ketchup. Post heating, post cooking, it is going to go for deaeration, then homogenization, pasteurization, filling in the bottle. It can be PET bottle, it can be glass bottle, or it can be pouch. Then if it is going to be bottle, then there is going to be capper as well. Then bottle pasteurizer or tunnel pasteurizer, or even spiral cooler for the pouches of the ketchups, labeling and bottle packaging on all this. Then we also have a look at tomato ketchup as imports. So if you see from 2009 till 2016, the percentage of import was quite high. Recently, in last 5 years, we have started lot many plants for tomato ketchup. That is also indication that we are becoming self-sufficient in tomato ketchup. Still, there is a market because, as you can see, still some amount of ketchup is imported from these countries. Now we see one of the most important aspect of tomato processing, that is tomato paste. Here are some of the photographs of typical tomato paste plant. On the left-hand side, you see the tomatoes getting sorted in a tomato processing plant. In the center are actually tomato paste bags filled for 3 kg and 5 kg. Turbo refiner to separate out the peel and seeds of tomato, and the aseptic sterilizer for the tomato paste. So on the right-hand side, you can see one of the biggest plants in the world, which is processing actually 120 tons per hour of tomatoes. This plant is located in China, that is Inner Mongolia sector, around 1,000 kilometers from Beijing. And this is actually processing 120 tons per hour, where in India we have some places 120 tons per day. So globally, as you can see, tomato paste lines are typically 60 tons per hour, 100 tons per hour. And that is because the seasons across the globe are short in comparison with Indian conditions. So to cover this, they process very large quantities in minimum time. Typically, Indian tomato paste lines are starting from 6 tons, going as high as 20 tons per hour. And the small tomato paste line. So I have so much of tomato, a lot of tomatoes are thrown on the road. So what is the solution? So actually we should promote, or we should start investing into smaller lines, that is typically 3 tons per hour line with a single head aseptic filler, which is going to give me output in the aseptic bag. And this aseptic bag has got a shelf life of 24 months in ambient condition. Once I open this bag, whether it is of 3 kg, 5 kg, 10 kg or 20 kg, it can be consumed for different purposes, and that can be stored throughout the year. This is a typical flowchart for the tomato paste line. On the top right, you see, top left-hand side, you see receiving of the tomatoes in the tomato flume. This flume can be in stainless steel or in civil structure, depending on the capacity of the tomato paste plant. And this water is continuously recirculated and filtered. From here, the tomatoes go into the hopper without chopping. Please note that these are without chopping, because these go without chopping into something called as hot break. So this is the unit called hot break. From hot break, the tomato is exploded in that particular atmosphere of 90 degrees, 95 degrees, and the juice is formed. This juice goes for refining and then into the juice tank. This juice tank will take it to the evaporator. It can be single effect, double effect, triple effect, or 5 effects as well, depending on the capacity of the plant. Here you are going to have the concentrate of tomato juice duly removed from seeds as well as peel, and this concentrate will go then for the aseptic sterilization and aseptic feeling. Here you can see double-head aseptic feeler. These are plants typically for tomato paste with number of evaporators. On the right hand side of the left photo, you see actually hot break and then 3 effects, 4 effects. Let us understand what is the tomato paste situation in India. The total value of tomato paste imported in India reached 20.64 million US dollars. That means this much can be still processed in India. That much scope is still there. The total quantity of imports grew by 146%. So in last few years, we actually increased our import because we don't get much of tomato paste, which is base for our increasing demand of ketchup, sauces, and other things. The total value of tomato paste imports in India during this 1920 year reached 19 million US dollar, and the growth rate was compounded growth rate was 160%. Okay, nearly 72% came from China. Now, depending on the relations of the China, this can go up and down, but we become dependent on so many countries. So to avoid this, we should be self-sufficient and go and invest into tomato paste line. Now here you can see the typical imports for tomato paste from 2009. So the quantities less than 5,000 tons, going more than 20,000 tons, metric tons, under a typical HS code of 200290. And again, you can see the most of the import was happening from China. Of course, Italy and USA are making progress in that. So we're more depending on other countries as well. But again, the processing is a must, that because we are importing so much of quantities. Pizza and pasta sauce growing at a very high rate. The demand is going very fast. So this is a part of emerging market which we are looking for. As you can see, the consumption of pizza and pasta sauce has grown by 43% per annum in last couple of years. So almost doubling in every 2 years. And apart from tomato ketchup, this sector is one of the fastest growing for tomato processing section. These are some of the machines just to understand how the pizza and pasta sauces are made. So these are typical machines for the typical lines for pizza and pasta sauce. The blending, cooking kettles, the buggy lifter, mixing, and all this with all the automation, necessary automation. This photograph is of existing plant for pizza and pasta sauce. This is another view of the same complex nature of kettle for pizza and pasta sauce. Another area where we can actually process tomatoes as a tomato processing solution is tomato juice. So tomato juice actually is highest consumed in India, which many people will find surprising, because a lot of people don't drink tomato juice as such. But we are highest, again, 109,000 tons, Japan 72,000 tons, Canada 58,000 tons, with a total combined 55% global consumption share between these 4 countries. So in terms of value, China constituted the largest supplier of tomato juice to India, comprising of 53% of the total imports. The second position was USA with 19% of the share, and it was followed by Germany with 4% share. Now, tomato juice is always made from cold break tomato paste. We'll not go into integrity of what is hot break and cold break tomato paste, but just for the sake of understanding that tomato juice is made from cold break tomato paste. Tomato powder, another area where things are moving very fast and in the right direction. So the total powder global market is predicted to touch 1842 million US dollars by 2027. So that's a huge market. Tomato powder is exported to 106 countries which are buying it. And year 2021, India actually exported tomato powder worth 11 million US dollars. Now, this tomato powder can be used in different applications. It can be for bakery, it can be for confectionery, it can be for frozen desserts, nutritional foods, curries, gravies, soups, so that this becomes the base for all this. Now, also let us understand the areas of emerging areas of tomato processing. We'll try to see what is the export potential in this particular sector in terms of processing of tomatoes, whether it is a canned tomato, whether it is a diced tomato, peeled tomato, tomato paste, tomato juice. So let's understand this. At present, Nepal is our key trading partner in terms of processed tomatoes with a share of almost 60% of total tomato paste. Our exports volume actually have been surging, whether it is for Nepal, whether it is for Bhutan, or whether it is for other countries. These have been surging quite a fast since last few years. The total value of tomato paste exports stood at $187,000 US dollars, a significant growth of almost 160%, which was compared to earlier to 2018 and 2019. The tremendous demand we have got for this particular sector in African continent, Southeast Asia, Gulf, due to supply shortfall from China. So China also faced a lot of issues because their farming was so huge and they entered into some issues. Again, 23% growth in exports in canned products like peeled tomatoes, diced tomatoes, or tomato juice, so that we get all this throughout the year. So if I get tomato seasonal, so you will say that tomato is seasonal, non-seasonal, because we get tomatoes throughout the year. Yes, but the rate varies. And it varies from almost 2 rupees a kilo or 3 rupees a kilo to almost 100 rupees or 120 rupees a kilo. So that is why the processing is a must. Again, exports were very high in last few years. Export to Nepal, again, the highest share. Other 47 being percentage is divided into Kazakhstan, Estonia, Georgia, China, Middle East Asia, and of course, Southeast Asia. Now, out of the exports we make, whether it is for canned tomatoes, diced tomatoes, peeled tomatoes, the 23% of the total volume of tomato ketchup and tomato sauce were exported to USA in 1920. Some of the quantities of tomato sauce, ketchup products were exported to USA. Actually, this is happening in last few years. So quite a hopeful that this particular section takes over fast. And these are exported to countries in USA, African subcontinent. And looking ahead at the demand, this is actually the sector we should be looking at. Now, here you will see some of the figures of volume of Indian exports, country and commodity wise during the year 2019 and 20. All the quantities mentioned are in metric tons. On the right hand side are the typical percentage shares. So as you can see, the percentage share, Nepal is leading in almost all the products, whether it is can or tomato paste. For sauces, it goes down to number 3, but the rest of the countries are doing quite nicely. Now here you will see the chart starting from year 2000, where the consumption of tomato on a personal level is going up. So that we can say as a per capita consumption of tomatoes. So there you can see the graph going up. And based on these production estimates on the import and export data, the apparent consumption of processed tomatoes is around 278,000. So that is 278,000 metric tons in 1920. And again, an increase of 20% annually happening in last few years. Similar growth patterns were also expected in last few years, also seen in last few years and expected in coming few years. Here you can see the red ones are actually production and the yellow ones are the actual production. So like we see, the demand is always more than the supply. So the gap is almost equivalent to almost more than 120,000 metric tons. So that's a huge gap. So that also means that there is a potential to process the tomatoes and remain in this market. These estimates also are consistent with the other data that shows that India's demand for the processed tomato products is expanding at an estimated rate of 30% annually. It is actually 33%, and driven by growth in the population, increased consumer demand for items like pizza and pasta, as well as the RTE items, gravies, curries, or bulk supplies to food retail chains, including fast food restaurants and hotel chains. The Indian market is also witnessing strong product diversification with expansion into curries and gravies, most fastest growing area of the RTE, curries and gravies, ready-to-eat curries, dry powder mixes, in addition to our traditional products like tomato ketchup, tomato puree, tomato juice, diced tomatoes, sliced tomatoes. So even though we are second largest producer, our consumption, per capita consumption is very low, which was equivalent to 0.17 kg. So that means for a single person, even to eat 1 kg of tomato is taking a lot of time. It's only 0.17, and this is likely to reach 0.54 by year 2023 and 24, which is again a promising area. The per capita consumption, we already saw this. The growth in tomatoes has been triggered by increase in domestic consumption, HoReCa sector as we call it, and the products derived from the processed tomatoes. According to NRAI, that is India Food Services Report, the market size of Indian HoReCa segment is estimated to be 1,48,353 crores, which is approximately 50 billion US dollars. And the segment is actually further estimated to grow at an annual rate of 15%, reaching to 2,57,905. So it's also time for recap. Let's understand what we have understood, global and Indian scenario. Number 2 in terms of production, but number more less than 15 in terms of actual processing. Actually, we are having highest wastage in the world, which is equivalent to 12.5%. A lot of farmers, growers throwing away the tomatoes during the season because they are not able to get the good rate and they are not able to supply to the factories. So we need to change the scenario, have the tie-up with the factories for the processing of the tomatoes. And then we can actually complete the shortfall of processing, which we should be doing in India. As we see the need for processing due to the seasons, what you can say, crashing of the tomato rates, that also scenario we understood. That also emphasized on the processing, why the processing is needed, because market may not absorb that kind of rates for that particular product. Then we have also seen what all we can do in terms of processing of tomatoes, whether it is diced tomatoes, dices starting from 5x5, 10x10 to 15x15 in tomato puree or tomato juice. Slices, I didn't mention this earlier, but there are also areas where we can actually have slices in the puree or slices in the tomato juice. Then we also have peeled tomatoes, the whole peeled tomatoes, which are actually very popular in Mediterranean countries. So that becomes a part of their cuisine, having the whole peeled tomatoes in the tomato puree. Then tomato paste, which is the most popular and most commonly known particular area of processing of tomatoes, which again is a base for tomato ketchup, pizza sauce, pasta sauce, or other sauces. And of course, tomato juice, which is a drinkable juice made from cold break tomato paste or tomato powder. Again, it can have various applications in terms of mixing and blending and going further. Now, the emerging areas, as I said, pizza sauce, pasta sauce, these are the areas where the demand is growing very high. Gravies and curries both require tomato puree or tomato paste as their base for these particular products. Again, very highly growing area. Both the areas growing more than 30-40% every year around the clock. Then the tomato paste, because we should have our own self-sufficiency, because there is a still shortfall of more than 120,000 lakh tons every year. So tomato paste, tomato pasta sauce, pizza sauce, and juices. But what we see as the most emerging is the tomato paste, smaller lines, 3 tons per hour, can be put up at a minimum investment near the processing area, near the growing areas. And of course, the pasta sauce, pizza sauce, and ketchups. These are the emerging sectors in this particular tomato processing area. So further we go for any questions or anything in this thing.
Yes, Krishna. There were a number of questions put up by the participants.
Okay.
And I'll just maybe go by the way they came in.
Yeah.
In terms of the order they came in.
Yes.
There was a question by Stephenson Daniel Chalapa, and I think he has put up a lot of questions.
Okay.
And the first question is, what is the lycopene content in the bricks of the Indian tomatoes?
Okay. So the typical bricks we get in Indian market is varying from say 4 to 5. Again, depending from area to area, whether we are in northern India, whether we are in central India, or whether in western India or south India. From area to area, this varies, but we can say that safely between 4 and 5. Most commonly is 4.3 and 4.5. So that is the most common. About the lycopene content, I will come back to you because again, this varies from region to region.
Yeah, and I think Daniel Chalapa has a few more questions.
Yeah.
And I think the question is actually revolves around the hot bricks and the cold bricks. And one of the points that he has put up is that in Indian conditions, the hot bricks gives a concentration value of around 28 to 30%. Whereas in China, using cold bricks, they go even up to 36 to 38%. So possibly you can just touch upon that aspect of hot bricks and cold bricks and what it does in each case.
Yes. So it is not that, so good question, Mr. Daniel. It's not that only China can do 36 bricks. It is, we also can do 36 or 38 bricks in cold break. The difference in cold break and hot break is actually in terms of processing of the tomato. So when I say hot break, it is actually breaking of tomato in a hot atmosphere. So a lot of people feel that I chop the tomato, I heat it, and that is called hot break. No, that is not a hot break. So I actually process the tomato in a hot atmosphere, not allowing my enzymes to get activated. So actually I transfer the whole tomato or a compressed tomato in an atmosphere where I have got 90-95 degrees temperature. The tomato explodes because of this temperature, and all the particles reach that particular temperature instantaneously, very fast. So there is no gradual temperature rise. It's an instantaneous temperature transfer. So that is why the enzymes get deactivated. And this is the way actually we are able to maintain the consistency or viscosity of tomato paste when we want tomato paste very thick, and also the color. So these particular hot break technology is going to maintain my color as well as maintain my viscosity or consistency of the tomato paste. So if you see all the ketchup manufacturers, whether it is Nestle, whether it is Unilever, whether it is Heinz, or whether it is any local player, they will ask you for hot break tomato paste. They will not ask you for cold break tomato paste, because the end product which is going to get processed from this particular hot break or cold break are different. So like I mentioned earlier during my presentation, tomato juice is typically prepared from cold break tomato paste, not from hot break tomato paste. So this is a difference between the process on the end usage. And again, as I said, we can process cold break, we can process hot break, but the demand for hot break is so much, it is dominating, and it is the requirement for the ketchup and sauces market. So that is why we have more of what we call as hot break 28, 30 or 32 bricks. I hope this answers his question.
Yeah, I suppose so. I think, and even if more information is needed, Daniel, you can reach out to us.
Yes.
Through our mail and various other ways you can get in touch with us. Sri Krishna, before I go, there are a number of questions around the investment level.
Okay.
Depend on the capacity of the plant. But before I go into the investment and numbers,
yeah,
maybe we should touch upon, take some technical questions.
yes.
And technical in the sense, there's one question by Fatima
Okay.
Patnaik saying that, does tomato processing preserve the nutritive value of tomatoes? Because this is typically the kind of questions that any kind of processing will have question marks around. So what will happen to the original fruit or the vegetables after processing?
So of course, certain percentage of nutritive value will be maintained. But when we are going for a thermal treatment, certain nutrient value is going to go down. So that is a part and parcel, because we are looking for longer shelf life. So typically when we are processing tomato paste, sterilizing it up to say 110 degrees, 115 degrees, and then packing it in aseptic bags, the result is 2 years of shelf life in ambient temperature. Now, in order to get ambient shelf life of 2 years, I need to do thermal treatment, which is going to affect certain percentage of nutrient value. But of course, there will be certain percentage of nutrient value in the tomato paste as well.
Yeah, and Ankit, there was another question from Aniket Tandon about the lycopene value, which you said you will come back to it separately.
It will vary. Yeah, it will vary from the variety. Yeah.
And there was a question about I think Keshav Ecker, who asked that which varieties gives the highest bricks value. So and maybe this can be answered along with another question from Chandrasekhar Reddy. Can all types of tomatoes be processed in the manner you explained?
Yes, we can actually process. See, what is going to happen? All the tomatoes can be processed, but your percentage of yield is going to get changed. So a typical varieties, certain varieties will be giving me higher percentage of yield. Typical some varieties will not give me that much percentage of yield. Again, the bricks level from variety to variety will change. So this, to answer the question that can we process all the tomatoes? Yes, we can process all the tomatoes.
Yeah, and there was another question by Keshav again. What is the maximum shelf life you can achieve with UST? I mean, you answered it, possibly you can just clarify it once again.
Yeah, 24 months is the shelf life.
Okay. There's another short question by Mufaddalal Mala.
Yeah.
And the question is very small, saying that per capita will grow by 3 folds. So I don't know if you could answer something out of this, or maybe you can ask for clarifications from Mufaddalal Mala.
Question?
Per capita will grow by 3 folds.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what has been written in the Q&A. So I think possibly the per capita of consumption.
I think he was talking about the figure. So the per capita consumption earlier was 0.17 kg per capita, which has gone to 0.54 now. And again, it will be going up. So his question and answer are almost similar, that the per capita consumption of processed tomatoes is growing every year.
Okay.
So in last 3 years, it has gone 3 times actually, 3 folds. So that is what he means.
So there is a good potential for processing, both in terms of increase in per capita consumption, both in the domestic market as well as in the export.
The international market, yes.
Yeah. So which will give us a good potential for exporting the tomatoes, processed tomatoes, because we have a very good production as well. Okay. Which we are number 2 in terms of global numbers.
Okay.
So there is a question by Nilap Singh saying that when you are exporting tomato powder, is it made from fresh tomatoes or is it from tomato paste?
So it can be made from both the ways. It can be made from fresh tomatoes, dehydrated, dried and converted into powder, and from tomato paste. Of course, the conversion cost in terms of value addition will change in both the places, because when I'm converting tomato paste, I'm putting certain amount of conversion cost. When I'm dehydrating tomatoes, in fresh tomatoes into dried tomatoes, I'm putting certain amount of conversion cost. The cost will vary from the way we are going to actually process for the powder. So when I require large quantities of powder, or the capacity of the tomato powder plant, that will determine how I should be going about that.
Okay, I think finally we'll come to the investment part. Yeah. And there are a number of questions around that. What is the typical cost of a 3 metric ton per hour plant? Yes. Somebody has also asked for in fact, a 6 metric ton per hour plant. And another typical question is, what is the minimum viable capacity of a plant? Can it be as low as 500 kgs per hour?
Yes. Okay. So I will tell you that we can give you 500 kgs per hour plant as well. But the financial viability of this particular sector, whether it is tomatoes or any seasonal fruit, tomato is also seasonal fruit when we talks about the processing variety. So although I get tomato throughout the year in the market, the price can vary from ₹5 to almost ₹100. Now, in terms of processing, I cannot process ₹5 and ₹100 tomato. So I work as per the seasons. When I have got the season of tomato, I will process at the lower rates, convert it into different products, and then sell it into different market, B2B or B2C. Now, coming back to the viability part, our experience of last so many years in this field shows that a typical Indian capacity viability starts from 3 tons per hour. So minimum plant should be 3 tons per hour. Maybe you have lower quantities of tomatoes, but then you run the plant for lower number of hours. The same line you can run for more hours during the next years when the capacity is getting increased or your harvesting is getting increased. Below 3 tons per hour also, we can give lines. There is no issue. But as I said, the calculations of financial viability. Now, when we say financial viability, it comes on in terms of the capex, that is capital investment. It comes out in the operational investment or per kg conversion cost, because the number of people required for 5 ton, required for 500 kgs, or maybe required for even 10 tons per hour line are going to be the same. They're not going to get change. So my manpower change is not going to be too much. My utility consumption will vary, but not in those proportions. So maybe the 500 kgs and 5 tons, that it doesn't require 10 times the utility cost. So what is going to happen is your product cost at a lower volume is going to get increased, and then your financial viability of selling that in the market is going to go down. So your profitability, because your conversion cost is higher, is going to go down with the lower capacity. So our observation says that we should start at least with 3 tons per hour. The most typical lines in India are 6 tons per hour. The biggest line in India has been 20 tons per hour. But unfortunately, although we are number 2 in terms of production of tomatoes, this line never ran for 20 tons per hour. There were few days in the month or every season when it ran up to 18 tons per hour. So again, coming back to the part that collection, integrated farming, receiving of tomatoes during the season for those many hours, this holds the key. So harvesting and post harvesting, or you are networking with the farmers, that is going to be important. So that will give you viability. Again, the plain line is minimum 3 tons per hour line should be there.
Okay, I think that should kind of give sufficient information to all those participants who have asked questions around the investment. And of course, you can always reach out to us for more information or details around that.
Yeah.
There's one technical question from Nilab Singh saying that, does the standard equipment separate the seed from the peel during the processing?
Yes. So tomato seed and peel is very light in nature. So we have a special equipment called a turbo refiner, which separates this particular seed and peel. And that is immediately after the hot break. So immediately after the hot break, when the juice is in hot condition, this turbo extractor actually separates the seed and peel of tomatoes. This goes as a wastage, or this goes as a wastage converted into kettle feed. But the wastage is very low, between say 3 to 5% maximum. Unlike in mango, we can have wastage as high as 40% or 50% also.
There was a question from Bharat Chaudhary that can we do, I mean, of course, he's interested in custard apple processing.
Okay.
So possibly we can get back to him on what with that particular custard apple processing or webinar,
yes,
as he's asking for.
Yes.
And of course, there are questions from Jnanindra Mishra about him wanting to set up a plant somewhere in southern part of India.
Okay.
Mr. Mishra, we'll also get back to you on that. We'll take more information from you, and then we'll be in touch with you on your specific requirement and plans to set up the plant. I think, yeah, then there was one typical question about what kind of calorimetric instrument would you recommend for the color ranges of tomato-based sauces, and so that is around the color measurement instrument.
Yeah. So we have different ranges of this particular instrument, and normally when the line capacities are high, these are used. Otherwise, this is done manually in Indian conditions typically.
Okay, I think there are, of course, other questions which are repetitive in nature, more around the investment as well, and lot of questions around lycopene content. I would not like to repeat that. So I think more or less we have tried to answer, I think, at this stage, most of the questions we have at this stage.
Okay.
So yeah,
we still have some time. So if you want to have a couple of questions, that's also okay.
Well, actually, again, I'll come back to saying that there are questions around, is your company working on a smaller capacity line, which I think you already answered.
Yes.
So, so that's where it goes. I'll just see if there's anything we're left out in particular. I think Mr. Daniel, we have answered. You had quite many questions. I think we have tried to answer it here. Around the cold bricks and hot bricks, and as I said, that you can again be in touch with us for anything more.
So for the people who the questions that they feel that their questions are not answered, our team has already taken note all the questions, and we will come back to you because you have been registered. So we know where to answer and whom to answer. So don't worry on that aspect. So if we don't have further questions, I will hand over to Nikhil for further our upcoming webinars and what all we have covered till now.
Sure, sir. We can move on to the next slide.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, thanks a lot, HoReCa sir, for the insightful session. And moving ahead, to all the attendees, you can check out the videos of previous webinars on our YouTube channel, on our official YouTube channel, and few of the upcoming webinars. Sir, next slide, please. So these are few upcoming webinars. New age dairy plant automation, why spiral hardening tunnel for ice cream products, application of steri tank for aseptic beverage processing, then current trends in food safety and hygienic risk assessment. So all of you will get the notification of this webinar from all the social media channels of Neologic, and as well as you will get the email notifications for the registrations as well. So next slide, please. Please take a screenshot of this slide so you can connect with us if you have any further requirement or further queries. sales@nepali.net is our official email address. And you can again visit our website to understand more about Neologic engineers. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.